Morning. Welcome everybody to Talking Niagara. And just to prove we can do it early, we're doing it early. Right. So it's Giblett and he's Dave Wheeler, and we're welcoming you to Talking Niagara this morning. It is the 6th of May today. So welcome everybody. 2025.
Yes, indeed it is. And
what's been with you, Dave?
yeah, and I'm trying to find where we are here. There we are. Yes. Okay, yesterday was May 5th. That was Red Dress Day and Cinco de Mayo. Go ahead.
Yep, go on.
Yes. So yesterday was May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. And I was talking to Paul Lemire yesterday when we were on his show for the agenda of City Hall. And he told me that in Mexico, Cinco de Mayo really isn't celebrated that much. It's mostly an American Mexican holiday. I didn't know that. I thought it was a universal celebration throughout Mexico. Anyway, he seems to think that Cinco de Mayo is not that well or celebrated in Mexico itself. As anyway. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well. Yeah. So, and so what we found today in the history, there's a lot of things going on. One of which is Friedrich Merz of Germany did not get the votes required to become the Chancellor of Germany, which was thought to be a given. It wasn't. And that means the power of the very far right is much stronger than they originally thought. If they and a few others can block Friedrich Merz from becoming the challenger, they'll have a couple more votes, but if they can't resolve this, they'll have to have another complete election.
Yeah. And that actually might just be their entire, strategy for the far right.
It could be. And it doesn't look good, really. But we'll see what happens there. It is the rise of populism that, and the far right, particularly populism, that is putting a strain on democracies everywhere.
Yeah.
And of course,
and we'll get to another example today as well, right?
Yeah, well, we've seen what populism can do just south of the border.
Yeah,
and how happy the supreme leader is down there doing what he does.
Okay, so one of the things we didn't get onto yesterday, which we were, or even Friday, was this Elon Pape talking about the last phase of Zionism. Now, Elon Pape is an interesting gentleman because he's Israeli by birth, I believe, and
an Israeli Jew, an
Israeli Jew, and yet he speaks fluent Arabic, and he's an intellectual. But he doesn't live in Israel anymore.
No, he lives in London, and he's a professor. I wrote it down somewhere where he's a professor.
Professor emeritus, but I don't know the university.
University of Exeter, I think. Is that that's it?
Okay.
But anyway, Elon Pape. This is an article that goes back a bit, but he is predicting the end of Zionism, but it will take a long process.
Yeah, he's saying 20 plus years.
Yeah. He describes sort of the regrettable way in which the Israeli society has moved. The Israeli society, he says, when he compares Jews in America to Jews in Israel, and there is a big difference in the way in which they're educated. Jews in North America are much more likely to have sympathy for what is happening to the Palestinians right now, this particular genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Jews in Israel, he says they have been indoctrinated with a process of education that
But
makes
not all. But not all.
well, he says the standardized education system indoctrinates Jews there to become more dehumanizing of the Palestinians. And he also talks about, and before I go on about that, but he is not the only one.
No,
He
he
is Elon Pepe. He is Gideon Levy and Miko Peled. These are all voices in the wilderness in Israel themselves. They get almost no attention. Gideon Levy once complained that when he speaks out about the excesses of Zionism and the Israeli expansionist and settler movement, he said he could probably get an audience that would fill a phone booth. That's how much he is rejected in his area. And Miko Peled, he is the guy that wrote The General's Son. His father was a general in the IDF, and he himself was part of a kind of a peaceful demonstration. And he decided, he was a young guy, he decided, heck with this, I'm going to go for a workout instead. And while he was at that workout, a settler, a far right settler, threw a grenade in the midst of the protesters. These are peace protesters, and killed a bunch of them. And Miko Pellets thought that as a sign that he should, start telling the truth, what his father had told him about Israeli expansionism and how they decolonized, or not decolonized, but colonized the Palestinians, how they forced them out of their land and all that.
Well, this has been going on since 1948, right?
Well, it's been going on before that, even before that.
Yeah, I know, but formally since 1948 with the creation of Israel, the state of Israel.
That's right. When the UN decided they're going to make an Israeli state, a state of Israel, they gave more than half the land to 1/3 of the people. That caused, of course, a lot of frustration. And in those areas, the Palestinians were depopulated, forced out. So you have refugee camps all over the Middle East, and general diaspora of Palestinians everywhere. But what's happened since the Zionist movement has had a process by which they want to expand, and they want to become what is called Greater Israel. And although the Zionists are not all of one stripe, the general idea is to expand the size of Israel and to push Palestinians out of the land in which they live, and have a complete ethno-Jewish state, ethno-religious state. Now, the real problem here is most of the West don't understand what has happened. Most of us don't know that. So when they see somebody like Yahya Sinwar doing the horrific thing he did on October 7th, they immediately sort of take sides. They don't understand the whole process that brought that situation to a head there. And
the worst about this, of course, is that Ellen Pepe talks about Europe essentially claiming to be model civilization, just ignoring the genocide that's going on as a result of this.
That's right. And if you and there's a very powerful,
and the rest of us here, the rest of us as well.
Yes, and there's a very, very powerful movement to have the definition of anti-Semitism become much more broader. The Anti-Defamation League makes anti-Zionism, equates it with anti-Semitism. So you cannot complain about Zionism. If you do, about the settler movement or whatever, that means you must be an anti-Semite. So the definitions are being controlled. The changes of the definitions are being controlled.
Yeah.
So you cannot have you cannot have a a debate about anti-Zionism. You can, and clearly, like intellectuals like Ilan Pepe, activists like Gideon Levy and Miko Peled, who are all Israeli Jews, they would be classified as anti-Semites in that definition. Norman Finkelstein and Noam Chomsky and other Jewish leaders, even like Bernie Sanders, may be called anti-Semite. Bernie Sanders, speak up. He is an American Jew, and he speaks up vehemently against what Israel is doing in Gaza as a genocide, and he would be defined as an anti-Semite just because he complains about it. And so the Israeli lobby in the United States is very, very powerful. It is a kingmaker, basically. You don't have anybody touching their influences are very powerful, and this is a disaster, of course, for the Palestinians. Even up here, we talk about the two-state solution, but the two-state solution is getting more and more impossible all the time because more and more of the land in which the Palestinians inhabit are being taken over by the settler movement. And right now, there's the genocide going on in Gaza, and you may balk at that term. Many people say, "Well, it hasn't really been determined as a genocide." Well, I can hardly think of it as being anything else, particularly when they're using food as a weapon. They have currently have plans of forcing all the Palestinians to the south near Rafah, where that's the only place they're going to be dispensing food and water. The other places will not be. And what they plan to do is go section by section, and they are destroying bakeries and places where water is provided, so they can force the people to the south, where that is the only place where water is going or sustenance is going to be provided, and therefore just kind of empty out those areas and take over. And they have brought in a lot more Israeli troops to do that. But in this article, Pepe says that is kind of the idea of a greater Israel and a little bit of an Israeli empire there is in its final stages. That Zionist idea of expansion and taking over more land and expelling more of the inhabitants of that land may be coming to its final conclusion. That's what he says. He says that this whole thing will eat Israel up. Basically, it won't work in the long run, but the process may take 20 years.
No.
And
and I get that. It's like, and he's and obviously Pepe is 70 years old, and he's more, I guess he's more or less predicting that this is going to be longer than his lifetime.
Yes, and I have to say that even Ilan Pepe, who has never been in a call for violence of any kind, he's never he's never been out there throwing rocks or anything like that. He's just a truth teller. He digs up Israeli history and speaks truth to it. And yet, the last time I think he came to the United States to speak, they held him for 5 hours.
Yeah,
they held him for 5 hours before they let him in. And the same things can be happening to Gideon Levy or Miko Peled. Remember, and we do remember the demonstrations we had in St. Catharines, and I wish I had attended that one. That was Palestinians and Jews trying to bring focus into what was happening to the Palestinians, and this is a lot of Jews among them, and they themselves would have been called anti-Semites or self-hating Jews, that kind of thing. So they really are controlling the narrative as much as they can. And Jewish people who like Noam Chomsky or Norm Finkelstein will be roundly criticized for being.
And even add into that list people like Bernie Sanders.
Yes, Bernie Sanders too. he would be
Yeah.
termed a self-hating Jew. So the
Yeah.
narrative is closing in on the definitions. But what Elam Pepe says is, because the West, and particularly most people, are very ignorant of what is happening, what has happened in Israel, and the start of Zionism, which began in 1897. And remember, in around the time the First World War began, there was only about 8% of that whole area was Jewish,
Yeah.
and the most of them were Muslim Arabs, but there was about 3 times as many Christian Palestinians there, which we seem to forget about quite often. And I would also point out that there's that boycott, diversity, and sanctions, where many organizations are boycotting Israel, divesting in it, and sanctioning it, and they are termed to be anti-Zionist, so therefore they are anti-Semitic. But that includes the United Church of Canada, which is a Christian church, of course, and they have come to that determination because of the cruel way in which Israel.
But the irony about what he's saying is, with all this history about Zionism, he's saying the final chapter is the most ruthless one and most ambitious, which is what we're going through right now. This expansion of Zionism to include the settlers, as you said, the boundaries of Israel being from the river to the sea.
Yeah, unfortunately, he says this will be the most brutal phase of Zionism, and he sees that it will Zionism itself will destroy itself, or at least turn in on itself, because it is a predictable pattern that he has noted, because he is a historian, of course, in a predictable pattern for a group like this. Anyway, so they go on to say many different things about the Palestinians. And remember, he's taken the time as a young man to learn Arabic, so he's very fluent in Arabic. And this is an English version of that Arabic interview that he's had in Denmark. And so he says, you have long said, Al Jazeera says to them, and this is an interview, that the tools of Zionism, nationalism, political ideology, and the call of a creation of a Jewish state, including captured land and evictions. For the past 15 months, Gaza has endured daily mass killings. And what Pepe is very surprised at Europe. He calls them, Europe claims to be the sort of the pinnacle of civilized state, and yet it has turned its back on what is happening now. It is revealing itself to be rather.
Well, the other thing about this is that it's saying here that the future of Israel and future of Zionism is very connected, of course, to the future of America.
Yeah, there's also a point here where we see a shift in Europe and other places to the far right. And in particular, he talks about Europe here because he expected Europe to be a little bit more sympathetic towards the Palestinians. And we see that aside from Ireland and Denmark and other places like South Africa, who stand up and try to promote the cause of the Palestinians, or at least ask for a ceasefire, and that the rest of Europe is kind of mum, and they say, oh well, you should do that naughty.
Yeah, but Britain and France have spoken up, but only in a mild way.
Yeah, well, it's just words, it's not actions.
Yeah.
And and he says, ironically here, he says that there still exists in Europe, among the far right, anti-Semitism, but what has replaced it is more anti is Islamophobia, basically. That it hasn't really replaced it. That the current of anti-Semitism stays there in among the right in Europe, but they also include Islamophobia. So right now, the Zionist movement and the far right of almost having a kind of this unholy ideological sort of purpose, basically. The far right is happy that there are no Jews or less Jews in Europe. So if they can dump them in Israel, they'd be just as happy as anything, because they don't have no love for the Arabs either. So if they can, encourage Jews to go to Israel and stay out of Europe, that would be just fine with them. And the Zionists, on the other hand, want more Jews to come to Israel. And so they have this sort of unholy idea. As a matter of fact, if you go back to before the war, there was talks between the Stern Gang and the leader of the Stern Gang and others, violent Zionists, that wanted to cooperate with Nazi Germany if Nazi Germany expelled its Jews to Israel. That was so they had talks, as a matter of fact, to that degree. So unfortunately, in the short term, or a very long short term, basically, you're going to find outrages that are happening in Gaza, and that's going to continue. The West Bank, he says that now that Zionism was a very slow, gradual eating up of territory and expelling of people, and it was generally thought to be that's the process to do it. But now, because of the situations has happened, Zionism is gone on fire, and they're going to eat up as much land as they can in the West Bank, and they're going to do what they can to expel Palestinians from Gaza. They're going to make it inarguable that is a place where they can live. They're going to make nothing left. There's going to make sure there's no bread, there's no hospitals, there's no schools. And if they can't get them out of all of Gaza, they're going to push them all to the south. So there's going to be 2 million Gazans in about a half or a third of the country.
Well, the other question, of course, that flared up and we haven't heard anything since, is with the collapse of the Syrian regime, the Israeli expansion through the Golan Heights, etc., out into southern Syria.
Yeah, the greater Israel kind of idea, the Zionist idea of a greater Israel includes.
I know that wasn't their original intention, but still.
Yeah, this could be an opportunity for the Israelis to expand, the Israeli state to expand into sections of Syria, which Greater Israel has always claimed.
Well, it ends up giving it really a buffer zone, doesn't it?
Yes, not just a buffer zone, but they would like really to colonize that area, because the idea of a Greater Israel includes both banks of the Jordan River, the Sinai, and a much bigger piece of property than Israel now currently inhabits. Probably more than twice the size of what is Israel now. And so that may take off. That is the fundamental idea, to make Israel a big, strong, powerful force, expansionist force. And whether that happens or not, I don't know, but that is what is happening. And like he says about the indoctrination and the dehumanization of the Israelis, because the Israelis are seeing on the TV what an American Jew would see as a dead Palestinian child and be kind of horrified by it. His counterpart in Israel said, good, another dead Arab kind of thing. Which is shocking, but he says that is happening, and he warned of this way back in 1999 when the educational system started to rewrite history, and the indoctrination of what he calls indoctrination began. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what's happening now. You have very little sympathy for what's happening in in Palestine or in Gaza to the average woman and child. Basically, you could understand them being, less sympathetic to a Hamas fighter or even a grown male, which they may suspect to be Hamas fighter. But when you have women and children, and I also the idea, well, they voted for Hamas, they're deserving what they get. Don't forget that that vote for Hamas happened in 2005, and it
Yeah.
only happened and it won by a slim majority of 44%. And then Hamas chased out its only rival, the 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 PA, the Palestinian Authority. It chased that out and has been controlling the area dictatorially basically ever since that time. So
Yeah, Mike.
you can't say they deserve it when half the people weren't even born when that vote happened.
Yeah.
And the other one, and much of the other ones were too young to even vote. They may have been living at the time, but they were too young to vote.
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea that they voted for Hamas, they deserve what they get, is preposterous.
Yeah. Mike actually asked the question, do you feel that reverse discrimination is so strong with Jewish people? If you disagree with Israel, you're automatically a Jew hater.
Yeah, that's the narrative they're trying to develop. And if I read a couple of things last night when I was preparing for this, and it talked about how the articles that come out, how anti-Zionism is actually anti-Semitism. And they talk about, if you are anti-Zionist, then you are you deny the right of Jewish people to have a state and to have their own destiny. That's hardly it at all. Most people who are anti-Zionists or anti-Zionists, what the anti-Zionists or the Zionists are doing basically is the expansionism.
It's not about anti-Zionism per se. The concept, you see, again, I've got very little objection to the concept of a Jewish state. What I have major problems with is how that Jewish state is managed.
Well, I have problems with it right from its creation. Now, the Jewish people are not going to go away from Israel, and Israel is not going to not exist.
Yeah.
But Israel was created by colonization and evictions of the people who lived there for thousands of years.
Yes.
And
many of them DNA-wise have similar traits.
Yeah. And so this has been, and when you take, when Zionism began, and what is now Palestine and Israel, the population was Arab Christians and Arab Muslims, and a tiny percent of Jews.
Yeah.
And the argument is, well, if you're anti-Zionism, you're anti-Semite because you don't want Jews to have their own country and all that. That is aside from the point. It's not you don't want to have them. You just don't want them to have the kind of state they have now. They were supposed to share that area. Yeah. And even in the original Balfour Declaration, which it looks idiotic in today's terms, but basically they were not supposed to have a state, basically, but a homeland. And the Arabs were also supposed to have a homeland in the area as well, as promised, as we know from things like Lawrence of Arabia. You know, the British used the Arabs to help fight the Ottomans there, and with promises of self-determination. And of course, they backstabbed the Arabs on that one. The French took Syria and Lebanon, and the British took Palestine and Jordan. And so I don't know. It doesn't look good for the long run for Palestinians. Um, those young Palestinians will be radicalized for a very long time, and because of what's happening. And do you think we're going to get any? And the West has been completely and they were on. What bothers me is when a bunch of hooligans, football hooligans from Israel, went to Netherlands and started causing a lot of trouble. The Netherlands government automatically took their side in all the disruptions, and it took them 2 or 3 days to sort out the fact that these hooligans were the ones that started it.
Yeah.
The riots there and the demonstrations, but they were loath to even consider that when it first happened. To them, it was just, oh my God, look at all this anti-Semitism right here in our streets. How could this happen? We thought this was all gone, but they didn't even
Yeah.
explore the causes of
Okay.
it. And the leader of Netherlands had to apologize for misinterpretation of the facts.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. Okay, so Pepe is also saying, I'm afraid there is not much of it can be done in the next 2 or 3 years. The only good news is that populist leaders like Donald Trump and nutcases like Elon Musk are not very capable. That's his analysis of the American president and his right-hand man. He says, in the long run, I think it will lead to less involvement by the United States in the Middle East. And for me, a scenario in which you have minimal American involvement is a positive scenario.
Yes, as somebody, and he also says that the global South will have to take the leadership here. The global North, basically, what we call what is the power of the
Yeah, the
world
Western
today,
nation. Yeah,
the Western nations, the global North. He says the global South will have to take over because the global North will never be trusted. Any initiatives from Europe, America, Canada will never be trusted by the Arab world. The ones that have to take on the struggle basically is the global South, and we see this has already happened with South Africa bringing Israel to the ICJ, the
yeah,
International Court of Justice, and the resistance that they had from the global North, and we find resistance, or at least or maybe the most tacit of acceptance from Europe. No enthusiasm there at all. No real interest in getting to the bottom of all this. But it was the South Africans that did it. You have also places that have suffered colonization, like Ireland, coming out strongly, and then of course you have the well-educated Danes who can see things in perspective.
yeah. But what you've got is what you've got is you've got intellectuals from many parts of Europe taking the side of the Arabs here, being anti-Jewish state here, but not the countries themselves. Or, as you
The
said
idea
earlier
to
on,
me is,
fine words rather than action.
well, the whole idea is the narrative is being twisted. If you're pro-Palestinian, aha, you're an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
And sadly, some of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations were just ignorant. They're based on ignorance, and but if you get the more rational ones, and that and we saw at Columbia University where Jewish students chained themselves to the fence just about a few weeks ago in solidarity with the Palestinian problem. So when it came pro-Palestinian, the narrative quickly changed to things like communism and anti-Semitism and all that. And I much more would like to point out that demonstration that happened at St. Catherine's, which involved Jews and Palestinians. And the Columbia demonstrations often had a lot of Jews within the Jews, a part of the pro-Palestinian, or at least Palestinian sympathized uh, demonstrations. We don't get an equal. We have a skewed reporting on Israel. We always have
Yeah,
had,
we do.
and it's a great struggle. And what bothers me is there is a powerful Islamophobia thing going on here now. Here, and maybe you could help any viewer we have here. You're quite aware of Islam, and because your wife is a Muslim, and you couldn't be convinced that Muslims are bad and evil and all
Well,
that.
you know, we obviously know that people like Osama bin Laden have horrible ideas, but thankfully they're not the majority of Islamic people. Majority of Islamic people just want to live in peace, want to want a better deal for their children than they had.
Yeah,
And that's a
basically the
lot of
same.
reason why they come to the West.
Sure.
You
And
know?
they're made of every different stripe as Christians
Yeah,
are too.
exactly.
You might get the odd radical, you might get the other guy that goes drinking and partying, and you need that's completely against Islamic
Well,
values.
by reputation, not that I ever met him, my father-in-law was a bit of a drinker and a partier.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
So, yeah.
He died way too young. He died way too young. With at the tip of an umbrella, apparently.
Uh-huh.
The Russian one.
Yeah, we got jabbed by
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's so many rumors in their family that he was, he was a spy for the British in colonial Kenya.
Oh boy.
I don't know whether it's true or not, but but again,
Yeah, but
yeah,
the thing here is that the bottom line here, Elon Pepe, he is a rational voice, a truth speaker,
yeah,
a speaker of truths, and so are Gideon Levy, Miko Peled, um, Norm Finkelstein, and Noam Chomsky, and Bernie Sanders.
yeah.
They are truth tellers, and they are all Jewish. And the first three I mentioned are actually Israeli Jews. That is where I get most of my information about all of this. I did get a big wake up call myself when I was in Libya and I worked with Palestinians, and it was revealing to me when they told me their story of how they were forced out of their property and all their land and stuff like that. I didn't believe them.
Yeah.
I did not believe them. Um, the Olympic the tragedy where at the Munich Olympics and other things were in my mind, and I just did not believe them. I thought to myself, these people are really trying to um, uh, intrude upon the rights of Jewish people to have a homeland. And it took me a while to wake up and understand these people were thrown off their land
Yeah.
when settlers came in, and that they were the diaspora they have was a result of this.
Well, the bombing in Munich was the first. Yeah, the bombing in Munich was one of the first. Sorry, not bombing. The killings in Munich were one of the first of these anti-Zionist movements by Arabs. First of a fight back, amongst many things. And the irony here, of course, is that Europe, Munich, the site of where the deaths of so many Jews were in the 30s.
Well, I didn't realize at the time that the terrorism, which of course I was against, was the means by which the Israeli state was forged.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the Israeli government looked the other way when the Stern gang, the Irgun killed nearly 100 people by blowing up the King David Hotel. That was
Yeah.
cold-blooded murder. They murdered Benedette, I think his name was, which was the Danish or Swedish UN official that came to try to make peace between the Arabs and the Israelis, and the Israelis murdered him. It was a terrorist gang that did that. So I don't know. It's had a long history, but in final, this is not going to go away anytime soon, and
Yeah.
I really don't know what we can do because our own Canadian politicians will not. When Elizabeth May stood up in the Parliament and she says, "We know what the problem here is. It's Netanyahu and is in the genocide," and she was roundly booed. That's because most of the people in there did not want to not boo because they would then be called anti-Semites, presumably. So anyway, it would be a good idea for one of the positive things that Ilan Pepe has pointed out here is that people are more interested in the creation of Israel now and how that happened. And once they learn that, they can see the injustices that happened to the people now called Palestinians.
Yeah.
And very often in the United States, they do not talk about Palestinian Christians, which made up about 25% of the population before Zionism began. And, if you have 25% of the population are Palestinian Christians and they are expelled from their land and they are persecuted, it doesn't sound good in the American news. So they never talk about it. It's only the Arab Muslims they talk about.
Okay, let's move on. Anything else on that?
No, I just say everyone to keep an open mind.
Yeah.
Be careful how you speak, because the people you talk to, most of the people I know very, very little about the situation and the creation of Israel and all of that kind of thing. Now, because then you'll automatically get you're an anti-Semite, or they'll be very, very reluctant to hear what you have to say. Remember, this is not against Jews. It's not against as a matter of fact, I don't see the Israeli state going anywhere. But I do wish for a second state of Palestine, and that is more remote every day as the settler movement accelerates its gravity.
Yeah, but again, if we're believing what Pepe is saying, that will lead ultimately a few years down the line to the not saying destruction of Israel, but to Israel basically turning in on itself.
Yes, and I don't know. They have. It wouldn't be as bad as Nazi Germany right now. The indoctrination that the Germans had as they expanded during Nazi, but there is that indoctrination that has become to dehumanize the Israelis, where they can no longer have sympathy for a dead child in its mother's hands, and they say, "Good, another dead Arab." So this is the kind of thing that Ilan Pepe warned about as early as 1999.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Labour's Anthony Albanese is riding a anti-Trump wave in Australia, and the opposition leader there lost their seat. Peter Dutton, who's the opposition leader, he lost his seat in Australia.
Yes, the same thing happened in Australia that happened here.
And within days, if you note, right?
Yes.
Their election was on Sunday, so that would have been on the 4th of May, and which is only like 6 days after the Canadian election.
Yeah, now Albanese was going to be vanquished. It was just as the Liberals were
Yeah,
going to be vanquished here, but the Trump factor kicked in big time,
yeah,
and that frightened the people of Australia the same way, or it actually galvanized the people of Australia the same way it did here. That we needed a strong opposition towards Trump. Trump was a threat. Now, they too, just like we have the political cycle of life, I call it up here, where you get liberals for so long, you get conservatives, you
yeah.
get liberals, and that kind of balances things out. But now that cycle of life in Canada and Australia has been interrupted, and it's been interrupted by the Trump factor, the
Yeah, and
Trump.
the party and the Conservative Party is called they're called the Liberal Party out there, but they're more akin to our Conservative Party.
And we find this reaction to populism. It's like populism was becoming populism very effective politically. We saw how well the conservatives were able to use populism in building up their ranks. However, they didn't pivot away from populism fast enough, and that kind of populist ideas that the conservatives had imitated from the Americans because it was so successful there suddenly became threatening to a lot of Canadians. So,
Well, the interesting thing about the Australian situation is the Liberal Party has been in the lead there for many years, and albeit through a coalition, they've actually managed to form one government or another for quite some time. Now they're talking about this Labour Party has got an 81 of 58 seats, and they had 68% of the vote.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot.
That's a big amount. But remember, they operate in Australia on a transfer vote system.
Okay, yeah, but so it's a little bit different setup.
Yeah.
So I would say that, but generally speaking, the lesson here is uh, people getting prepared, and the one man, the one man has been able to change all that. Where it's not working, however, as we've earlier said in the show, that Frederick Merz of was not elected as the chancellor, and that is because of the populist upswelling against him.
Yeah.
So right now, the reaction against populism hasn't happened in Europe, and we find also Marie Le Pen's party is still very
Well,
popular.
actually, it's an interesting thing is the kind of oddity in all of this one, but I think the oddity in all of this in across the world is the British Labour Party. But it's not because the Labour Party's in power in Britain, but I think the issue isn't because of an anti-populist wave. It was in Britain. It was you are up about against Rishi Sunak's Conservatives had been almost seen as corrupt, ineffective, corrupt, incapable of governing anymore, which is
Okay, so that's an undeniable
choice.
factor if
Yeah,
they're corrupt and they really can't govern anymore. But you get to that point where you just want to get rid of the party in
yeah.
power, as we did, like Stephen
But it's
Harper had
not.
a good long run,
Yeah,
and we finally got fed up with him. We got to get rid of him, and then Justin comes in, and he had his full run, and like I said, he
yeah.
should have been.
We got bored
The
of him, and we got
conservatives
to get rid of
should
him.
have
Yeah,
then won that election,
yeah,
but the cycle of life, political life, has changed, and populism, the rise of populism in the United States, is the cause of that.
yeah. And and basically it's the Liberal leader that actually took the fall on this one, and his name was Peter Dutton, and he conceded defeat at the end during the course of the election, and like Polyev, he lost his seat.
Yeah, you see, it's kind of like a mirror image of what happened in Canada, and for the same reason.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for us, like if take Trump out of the situation, and we would have had most likely would have had a conservative party a majority, and we would have sort of been able to work get the tired old party out and then brand new ideas and a new party in,
Yeah.
and then their cycle of life would come to an end and another
Exactly.
liberal party would come in.
Yeah.
That's been interrupted, and that's upset a lot of people. And we see the reactions here in Canada, where Alberta's put their foot down and demanded something happen right away. Quebec itself is wavering itself, so even we've this has exacerbated problems that could have been sorted if the Conservatives had got in, they would have just worked to help Alberta do what they would do, and Alberta then would be appeased because now they have a government that would be more sympathetic to their points of view. But right now, our own country is there are could split up because I mean the potential is there
Yeah.
because
Again, I see big problems for Alberta. A landlocked state does not, a landlocked nation does not fare well. It needs a coast.
well it would all it has to do is line up with the United States and become the 51st state on its own,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that would be much more pleasing to the United States, because when they talk about the 51st state, if Canada became 51st state, then that would make the Dems more powerful in the United States because we would be more Democratic leaning, but not out west. Alberta would be a strong red state, and so yeah, sure, they'll take Alberta for sure. And part of the cessationist movement, there are some that say that we want our independence. There are some that say we want our independence along with Saskatchewan and northern BC, and there are some that just say we want to attach ourselves to the United States, become a state of the United States.
Yeah. So they're not unified in that regard.
Oh no, they're different aspects. Plus, the indigenous people of Alberta are very wary of the whole thing, and are accusing Danielle Smith of sort of being a drama queen and a bit, and manufacturing over manufacturing a crisis.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. The city of Brampton went to London for a conference. We were talking about conferences the other week. They went to London for a conference, and they spent 8,000. Some people there spent $8,000 on a chauffeur service during that trip.
Yes, now that the eyes have been put on the educational system and the abuses of some of the trustees, and how they have abused the system, where the educational money is becoming less and less, and you find boards going to Italy or going to Jays games and having weekends out, using up resources that are for the educational system. So the eyes are put on now. Now the eyes are opening even wider that Brampton here have had their people going off on jaunts all over the world, and
Yeah.
they went to they used $8,000 worth of money for chauffeur driven taxis, and they said, oh well, we were advised to do this for safety reasons by the
Yeah.
officials, and they could not confirm it. And when the press asked, well, who advised you of this? And then they went to search for them, and nobody remembered anything of the kind.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that it's not just once but twice. They did it in England. They were chauffeur service for a 4-day trip from London to parts of the Midlands. In Japan, they spent 679,000 yen. I have to say it that way because it sounds a lot of money. 6,500 there in terms of another jaunt on a limo.
Now the whole they say, oh well, that's fine, it's fine. We've gone off to these different places for because we're really interested in getting more industry and more trade and other business connections. But when you drill down a little bit, you find the unlikelihood of any of that coming to fruition. It seems to me like these people are going, like they went from Dublin to Pakistan to the United States, all on flimsy reasons. They had lovely trips, and they were using taxpayers' money to go there, and they covered their jaunts with the idea, oh yeah, well we're pursuing prosperity, kind of like when Diodati went to China, but that was really kind of different. The whole town knew exactly why they were going to China, the Thundering Waters thing, why they were going to. Everybody knew, and that was,
Yeah, people may have had different views upon what about its necessity, but everybody knew. Yes.
In both Japan and England, Brampton spent thousands of dollars on drivers for its visiting delegation. In England, spent $8,400 on chauffeur service during a 4-day trip. Oh, I'm sure that Brampton taxpayers are happy about that.
Yeah.
For Japan, Brampton paid, what you just said, and which is about $6,500. The Brampton's Director of Economic Development said the chauffeur service was recommended by the British Consulate General in Toronto office for safety reasons and for timely delivery of participants. You tell me an ordinary taxi cab wouldn't do the same thing.
Exactly.
London cabbies are famous for knowing every inch of the town.
And hey, I remember we were at when I was at work one time. We had this central London drink night because we were with our client, and they said, "Come, we're going to out to celebrate the fact we'd installed, we put this system in place," and they were happy about it. So yeah, we went out on a celebration. Well, we probably spent a few $100 on the company in terms of the celebration. And then getting home for the night, we basically hired a London cab, and we got to most of West London in like £30.
Well, there you go. And the consulate spokesperson, they say that they were advised by the consulate to have chauffeur-driven limousines kind of thing. But a consulate spokesman, however, said they were not aware of having provided specific recommendations for transport in London, England. And I would imagine if they asked the consulate, what would you advise, which I wish they would have, then the consulate would probably say any old cab is fine. Yeah. And we do know that London,
certainly London.
Yeah,
certainly London.
Yeah, London cabbies have to go through an apprenticeship.
Yeah,
because London is that's how
same with New York
cabs are. Yeah. And because pardon me,
I said it's the same with New York.
Yeah, I don't think
Italian. Yeah.
So the idea that that a city councilor is going or city staff going to England and have to be more safe than anyone else using chauffeured cars. Oh my God. And the city said it had met with several British businesses associated with Brampton in London, like Chaiwala, IR2 Packaging, and Horstman. The Japanese included a visit to the cannons Canon's headquarters in Japan because the camera maker's
The what?
Canadian headquarters is located in Brampton. Do they really need all that? And do they have to go to Japan? And I would like to see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
fruits of that labor
they
come.
produce.
Yeah, the fruits of that labor come in jobs for Canadians.
It says working with stakeholders, the office seeks new and sustainable opportunities for growing international business ties for the city of Brampton. The economic development head said in a statement about the London trip. This investment mission was planned to meet face to face with the companies in UK and discuss collaboration. However, it later says this is very unlikely that anything was gleaned from this or could have been. Similar statement about the Japanese and Philippines trip. Oh my God. Can you imagine if somebody from Niagara Falls went around like they did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mayor Patrick Brown, and we keep hearing Patrick Brown, and he's always in a shady zone, isn't he? He's always questionable, to say the least. And even when he was down here with the region, he had to hightail it because of dodgy practices.
And they confirmed he had gone on the London trip. His office has.
And now the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, which advocates for more restrained public spending, said the trips shouldn't have been paid for at all with property taxes, even if Brown had covered his own expenses. So Brown covered his own ass, basically, a little bit there. The whole trip really seems like an inappropriate use of public money. I would say that's an understatement.
There are occasions whereby going to like a trade fair or something like that may have value, right? But on the whole, a lot of this is so dodgy, right?
These trips are our latest in a series of foreign missions undertaken by the city of Brampton. Seriously. I don't think they're going to get. I think it's a nice little holiday for everybody, and they're trying to act like bigwigs.
Yeah.
Now, normally, like in another instance, a counselor traveled twice to Dubai in a single year, once to meet with a company that had already agreed a deal with the University of Brampton. So that was already happened. Other trips included California and Detroit in the United States. A slew of foreign trips for staff and counselors in Brampton comes as the province puts intense pressure on school boards. Of course, that was
what we were talking about a week ago.
The excesses of that.
Yeah. No, that's exactly. I just happened upon this article and I went, okay, let's dig further.
Yeah.
Right. And as I say, I'm all in favor of us learning from foreign businesses, from foreign authorities. But I'm also very conscious that if we do make foreign trips, we have to make sure we don't waste money. And a limo service is not called for. Nobody knows who Patrick Brown is. He could travel the London Underground with perfect safety. Nobody knows who the hell he is.
It says when you can do it, you do it as the Ontario Trade Minister. That's the guy that should be there.
Yeah.
If this was thought to be that beneficial for the city of Brampton, you would have had the Ontario Trade Minister with them. They
Absolutely.
would have included somebody of weight. The Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing Office did not respond to questions from the Global News asking if the Ford government approved the Brantford's foreign direct investment strategy. That would be interesting. It seems to me that I don't think the Ontario, whoever is responsible for Ontario economics, the ministry would indeed approve of such things. If he was there, if they had an aspect of it as an Ontario delegation, that you could say was more likely to be beneficial.
Yeah, and exactly. I think that if you're going to take, what you would do is you would be organizing an Ontario-based delegation that might take a dozen, say you were organizing one to just pick a city at random, Budapest, right? In Budapest, right? You would take the trade minister from Ontario, and you might take the mayors from half a dozen different cities on that same delegation to this trade fair in Budapest, right? Because there'd be that opportunity to talk with people and talk about trade to Canada, from Europe, to explore options.
So this is obviously an abuse of their situation. Somebody has decided this would be good. Of course, the staff are not going to say anything. They're going to get a free trip out of it. And what has been gleaned from any of this? They are already connecting with people that have already made deals. They're going to the Canon headquarters because Canon headquarters in Japan, because Canon's representatives in Canada are in Brampton. Well, what does that help? Does it make Canon any bigger? Does it make Canon? Is Canon going to invest a whole lot more money in Brampton? No.
And what did they pay?
It serves no purpose.
Yeah, it serves no purpose. Yeah. And what did they pay to Canon for that trip?
I'm not sure they paid Canon or anything, but they went on a jaunt to Japan on the ostensibly to generate positive trade and cooperation with new companies and stuff like that. I don't think they did anything. I would the whole trip, all these trips they're talking about, I don't think they've been really investigated. What you need, you're going to need an auditor general to go over that.
Yeah.
And I bet you what they come up with is just like this was a happy way of pretending that you're a bigwig from Brampton and have a joyous old holiday. All you have to do, all right, let's go for a holiday in Japan, and we got to make it look good. So let's go to the Canon office in Japan and do a little tour, okay, and then we can party hardy.
Yeah, exactly. The one serious bit of it lasted 5 minutes.
Yeah. And that is generally what you do on a situation like that. You make it look good by reporting back. We went here and we went there, but where is that money spent? $8,000 in chauffeured limousines.
Yeah.
And even the lie that they said that, the consulate said that would be the safe way to go. What are you being safe from?
And
what are you being safe from? Who's going to be after you? Somebody from Brampton.
If I were in that Brampton
staff member from Brampton, what do they have to be afraid of that they need a chauffeur-driven limousine?
Yeah, if I were in that Brampton delegation, I'd be renting a car.
You can rent a car, but as I said, if you were in London, you don't need one. The cabbies, and you have a receipt too. You can get a receipt from the cab.
Yeah, but you see, I'd rent a car because of the fact that I know the area.
Well, but they don't. Okay, you come from London, they don't.
Yeah.
And if you want to be on the up and up, what you want to do is show everybody that you are fiscally responsible. Yeah. And you would take a cab.
Oh, the cab.
I don't say that you would have to take public transport, but you should do that.
Yeah.
All you have to do is take an ordinary cab.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, just
being seen as and that's being seen as responsible. It might be, it might be not be cost effective in comparison to a tube, but but it is still fiscally responsible. Yeah, absolutely.
My point is, they had nothing to be afraid of. Yeah. The safety thing was just a foolish idea.
It's nothing. Yeah, there's no, like it's safe. generally speaking, you're not going to die unless you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time in Toronto. And likewise, you're not going to die in London unless you happen to, by misfortune, to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you could be there in a limo as well as you could be in a taxi, right?
This is analogous of me saying, well, I'm a member of the Kiwanis Club of Stanford, so in order to be safe when I go to London, I'm going to have to charge my club money for a chauffeur's limousine because I have to be safe.
Yeah. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do they ride around in chauffeured limousines in Brampton because they have to be safe?
And the irony here is that those councillors are more likely to be known in Brampton than they would be in London, right?
Yeah. So
oh, you're mayor of Brampton. Well, whoopee-doo, I don't even know where Brampton is. Might be the London response, right?
Yeah. Well, it's very clear that there's being a shakeup all over. The trustees, city councils, I don't even know why the voters of Brampton permitted this to happen, if they even knew much of what was happening.
I don't think they knew. Yeah.
Or are they being flim-flammed?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to call it quits on this one.
Yes, indeed. We'll call it quits. And as I say, at the conclusion of every show, the genocide in Gaza is continuing. It is a horrible situation that's happening there. The world is turning their eyes on it. As we've talked about, Ilan Pappé making that very, very clear that there is no real end in sight in the short term. So do not forget Gaza. Do not let it go off the front pages in your mind, because this is a complete failure by the West, an utter failure by the West in not being able to restrain its own ally in the most malicious type of genocidal actions. Seriously, if you have problem with genocide as being used as a term, but you cannot deny the fact that thousands and thousands of innocents have been killed and maimed needlessly in this. So without further ado, I bid you adieu and pray for peace.